Most people don't realize it, but leadership is heard before it's seen. Before anyone notices your results, before they trust your decisions, before they follow your direction, they hear your voice. And in that first moment, your voice answers a silent question. Is this someone I should listen to? Most people fail this test without knowing it, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack ambition, but because their words rush ahead of their authority. They speak fast. They explain too much. They soften statements before anyone challenges them. And without realizing it, they sound like followers trying to be heard, not leaders setting direction. If you've ever felt that people talk over you, dismiss your ideas, question your decisions more than they should, or don't take your words seriously, this audiobook is not about speaking louder. It's about speaking differently. In this audiobook, Speak Like a Leader, you are going to learn why powerful people sound calm when others rush, why they speak with intention instead of urgency, and why their words carry weight even when they say very little. This is not about confidence tricks, not about charisma hacks, not about manipulating conversations. This is about status alignment. Because your voice always reveals your internal position, and people respond to position, not potential. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people talk as if they are asking for permission to finish a sentence, permission to hold the floor, permission to be taken seriously. Leaders don't ask, they assume. They assume their words matter. They assume silence will wait for them. They assume others will adjust. And because of that assumption, others do. This audiobook will show you how to build that assumption into your voice, naturally, calmly, permanently, not by forcing dominance, but by removing weakness. Because leadership language is not about adding more. It's about subtracting what doesn't belong. Now listen carefully. Powerful people don't rush their words because they are not chasing relevance. They already know where they stand. Urgency in speech often signals insecurity. It tells the room, I need to get this out before I lose my chance. Leaders don't fear losing their chance. They create space. And space changes everything. When you slow down, people lean in. When you pause, people wait. When you speak with restraint, people listen. This is why two people can say the exact same sentence, and only one sounds like a leader. Same words, different weight. Leadership weight comes from inner alignment, and that alignment shows up first in how you speak. Throughout this audiobook, you'll learn how leaders speak with certainty without sounding aggressive, remove emotional noise from their tone, use silence as authority instead of filler, speak less and be heard more. Control rooms without controlling people. You'll learn why leadership speech is slower, cleaner, and more deliberate, and how to retrain your voice so it reflects status, not urgency. Because here's the reality. People don't follow the smartest voice. They follow the steadiest one, and steadiness is audible. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how the most powerful person in the room often speaks last? Not because they were unsure, but because they were observing. They let everyone else reveal themselves first. They didn't rush to contribute. And when they finally spoke, the room shifted. That shift is not accidental. It's trained, and it's learnable. This audiobook will walk you through that transformation step by step, from how you form sentences, to how you hold pauses, to how you deliver decisions under pressure. But before we go any further, you need to understand one thing. Leadership speech is not about impressing people, it's about calming systems. When people hear a leader speak, their nervous system settles. They feel direction, they feel containment, they feel certainty. That feeling is what creates followership, and it has nothing to do with volume. It has everything to do with control. Control of pace, control of tone, control of emotion. In the next chapter, we'll expose the single habit that instantly strips authority from otherwise capable people, and why breaking it changes how everyone hears you. Once you see it, you won't be able to unhear it. Chapter 2. Urgency kills authority. There is one habit that silently destroys leadership presence faster than almost anything else. It's not weak vocabulary. It's not lack of knowledge. It's not even fear. It's urgency in speech. Urgency sounds like speed. Urgency sounds like compression. Urgency sounds like someone trying to get ahead of the moment instead of standing inside it. And the problem is this: urgency tells people you are reacting, not leading. Leaders don't chase moments, they set them. Now let's be precise. Urgency in speech doesn't always mean talking fast. Sometimes it's subtle. It's jumping in before someone finishes. It's stacking sentences without pause. It's answering questions before they've fully landed. It's explaining immediately, just in case. All of that communicates the same thing. I need to secure my position. And leaders never sound like they need to secure anything. They sound settled. Think about the last time you heard someone truly powerful speak. Not perform, not motivate, not entertain. Just speak. Their pace was slower than expected. Their tone was even. Their pauses were intentional. They weren't rushing to prove clarity. They were clarity. That calmness didn't come from confidence tricks. It came from internal certainty. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people speak urgently because they don't trust silence. Silence feels like loss of control, like a gap someone else might fill, like a risk. So they rush. They try to stay ahead of the room, but the faster you move verbally, the more you give away control. Because speed hands power to the listener. They decide when to interrupt. They decide what to remember. They decide when you're finished. Leaders reverse this. They slow the room down. They make others adjust to their tempo. And tempo is dominance. Now let's talk about the psychology behind this. When someone speaks slowly and deliberately, the brain assumes confidence. It thinks, they're not worried. They're not threatened. They're not scrambling. That assumption alone elevates status. The words don't even need to be extraordinary. The delivery carries authority. Urgency, on the other hand, activates the listener's nervous system. Fast speech triggers alertness, not trust. And trust is the foundation of leadership. People follow those who make them feel steady, not those who make them feel rushed. Now notice something important. Leaders don't remove urgency from content. They remove urgency from delivery. They can speak about high-stakes decisions without sounding pressured. They can deliver bad news without emotional acceleration. They can disagree without sharpness. This is what separates command from chaos. Now pause for a moment. Think about how you speak when you're under pressure. Do you speed up? Do you explain more? Do you stack ideas without breathing? That's not because you're incapable. It's because your nervous system is leading, not your intention. Leadership speech begins when you lead your nervous system first, before words, before sentences, before tone. When your body is calm, your voice follows. And when your voice is calm, people listen differently. Now here's a rule leaders live by, whether consciously or not. Never speak faster than the moment requires. If the room is tense, slow down. If people are emotional, slow down. If decisions matter, slow down. Speed is rarely necessary. Urgency is almost never required. Now let's talk about restraint. Restraint is not hesitation. Restraint is confidence that you don't need to say everything. Leaders don't empty their thoughts into conversations. They select, they compress, they deliver only what moves things forward, and they leave space. Space is where authority settles. Now imagine this. Two people say the same thing. One says it quickly, filling every second. The other says it slowly and stops. Which one sounds like the leader? Every time, it's the one who wasn't afraid of the pause, because pauses communicate self-trust. And self-trust is audible. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper. We'll break down how leaders use pauses as power, why silence after a sentence matters more than the sentence itself, and how learning to stop speaking at the right moment changes how your words land. Once you master that, your voice will no longer chase attention, it will command it. Chapter 3. Pauses create power. Most people believe power is delivered through words. Leaders know power is delivered through what happens after the words. The pause, the silence, the moment where nothing is said and everything is decided. Pauses are not empty space. They are signals. They signal confidence. They signal control. They signal that you are not dependent on reaction. Most people are afraid of pauses. They rush to fill them because silence feels like exposure. But leaders understand something critical. Whoever is comfortable with silence controls the conversation. Now, let's break this down. When you finish a sentence and immediately continue speaking, you weaken your own point. You don't give it time to land. You don't allow others to process it. You don't let gravity do its work. Pauses are gravity. They pull attention toward what was just said. Without a pause, your words slide past. With a pause, they settle. This is why experienced leaders often say less than expected. They speak, then stop. They don't decorate their statements. They don't chase agreement. They let the room respond. And response is information. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people keep talking because they're afraid of being judged. They fear that silence means disagreement. So they preemptively defend, they clarify, they justify, they soften. And in doing so, they strip authority from their own voice. Leaders do the opposite. They make a statement and wait. If there's disagreement, it will surface. If there's confusion, it will be asked. If there's resistance, it will reveal itself. Silence exposes reality. Talking hides it. Now let's talk about the psychology of pauses. When someone pauses after speaking, the listener's brain goes to work. It fills the gap with meaning. It assigns importance. It assumes intention. That assumption almost always works in your favor when your tone is calm. Pauses elevate simple statements into decisive ones. Even ordinary words sound authoritative when followed by silence. Now consider this. A leader says, "We're moving forward with this plan." And then they stop. No explanation, no defense, no additional context. That sentence lands differently than, "We're moving forward with this plan because we've considered multiple options and we think it's the best approach right now." The second sounds careful. The first sounds final. Leadership language is not about convincing. It's about closing loops. Pauses close loops. Now let's talk about emotional regulation. Pauses are not just external. They are internal. A leader pauses before responding. Not because they're unsure, but because they're choosing. That pause prevents emotional leakage. It stops defensiveness from entering the voice. It keeps tone grounded. Most people speak at the speed of emotion. Leaders speak at the speed of intention. That difference is everything. Now let's talk about meetings. In meetings, the most powerful voice is rarely the most frequent one. It's the one that speaks after listening, and then pauses. Leaders let discussions unfold. They observe patterns. They notice repetition. They wait until it's clear what needs to be said. Then they speak once, and they pause. That pause signals finality. The room adjusts. People stop debating. Direction forms. Now let's talk about everyday conversations. You don't need to be in a boardroom to practice this. Try it in simple moments. Ask a question, then pause. Make a statement, then stop. Respond, then wait. Notice how people react. They slow down. They listen more carefully. They often say more than they intended. Because silence invites truth. Now here's a critical warning. Pauses only work when your internal state is calm. If you pause while anxious, it feels awkward. If you pause while grounded, it feels intentional. So the pause is not a trick. It's an expression of inner control. That's why leadership speech is trained from the inside out. You don't add pauses. You remove urgency. Now pause yourself. Right now. Feel the stillness. That stillness is the source of authority. In the next chapter, we'll expose another habit that quietly destroys leadership presence. Over-explaining. Why leaders don't narrate their thinking. Why explanations weaken decisions. And how to replace explanation with something far more powerful. Once you hear this, you'll stop talking about leadership and start sounding like one. Chapter 4. Why leaders don't over-explain. There is a moment where authority either holds or quietly collapses. That moment is when you feel the urge to explain. Most people think explaining is clarity. Leaders know explaining is often self-doubt leaking into language. Over-explaining does not strengthen a point. It weakens it. Because explanation shifts your role. You move from decision-maker to defender, and defenders are always one step behind. Now let's be very precise. Leaders are not unclear, they are selective. They don't narrate their thinking in real time. They don't open every internal door for inspection. They don't justify before being challenged. They state, and they wait. That waiting is not arrogance. It's confidence that the statement can stand on its own. Most people explain because they are uncomfortable with uncertainty. They fear, what if they misunderstand me? What if they disagree? What if they think I'm wrong? So they preemptively soften. They say, let me explain. What I mean is, just to clarify. And in doing so, they signal that the original statement wasn't strong enough. Leaders don't do this. They trust their words. And more importantly, they trust themselves. Now here's a truth that will change how you speak forever. If your statement requires immediate explanation, it wasn't delivered with authority. Authority doesn't need backup. Authority invites response. Now consider this. A leader says, this is the direction we're taking, and stops. No reasons, no disclaimers, no emotional padding. What happens next? People react. Some agree, some resist, some ask questions. And that's exactly what the leader wants. Reaction reveals reality. Explanation hides it. Now think about the opposite. Someone says, this is the direction we're taking, and here's why, and I want to make sure everyone understands, and we've thought about all the options. That doesn't feel strong. It feels defensive, even if the logic is solid. The tone betrays insecurity. Now let's talk about leadership psychology. People don't follow explanations. They follow certainty. Certainty calms nervous systems. Certainty reduces ambiguity. Certainty creates alignment. Explanations do the opposite. They invite debate. They create openings. They shift focus from direction to justification. Now let's be clear. Leaders do explain, but only when explanation creates leverage. They explain after a decision, not before. When alignment matters, not when authority is needed. When teaching, not when positioning. Timing matters. Explaining too early dissolves authority. Explaining too late confuses direction. The 1% understand the difference. Now let's talk about sentence endings. Most people sabotage themselves at the end of sentences. They add qualifiers. They trail off. They soften the landing. Leaders end sentences cleanly. They don't fade. They stop. That stop is power. A clean ending tells the room, I've said what needed to be said. No more. Now pause. Think about how often you keep talking after the point is made. How often you add, just in case. That habit is costing you more than you think, because leadership is not about having more to say. It's about knowing when you've said enough. In the next chapter, we'll move deeper. We'll explore tone. Why leaders sound calm even when stakes are high. Why emotional control matters more than clever words, and how to speak with gravity instead of tension. Once you understand this, your voice won't just sound different, it will feel different to everyone who hears it. Chapter 5. Tone is a status. Before anyone processes your words, they feel your tone. Tone reaches the nervous system first. Meaning comes later. This is why two people can say the same sentence, and only one sounds like a leader. Same words, different status. Leaders don't sound emotional under pressure. They don't sound sharp when challenged. They don't sound rushed when stakes are high. Because leadership tone is not reactive. It is regulated. Most people think tone is about personality. It's not. Tone is a byproduct of internal control. When your inner state is calm, your voice becomes steady. When your inner state is tense, your voice betrays it. No matter how carefully you choose words. That's why leadership speech begins before you open your mouth. Now listen carefully. People don't trust voices that sound emotionally invested in being right. They trust voices that sound settled in direction. Emotion in tone signals volatility. Calm signals safety. And people follow safety. Now let's talk about the most common tone mistake. Raising pitch under pressure. When people feel challenged, their pitch rises slightly. It's unconscious, but the listener hears it immediately. A rising pitch sounds like justification, defensiveness, seeking approval. Leaders keep their pitch grounded, not artificially low, just stable. That stability communicates, I am not threatened, I am not rushed, I am in control. Now let's talk about speed. Fast tone feels anxious. Slow tone feels confident. Leaders speak just a fraction slower than the room, not dramatically, just enough to reset the pace. That slowdown forces others to adjust, and whoever sets the pace controls the interaction. Now let's talk about volume. Leaders don't raise their voice to be heard. They lower it. People lean in when something feels intentional. Loudness is often compensation. Quiet authority is magnetism. Now here's something subtle. Leaders rarely change tone mid-sentence. Most people do. They start strong, then soften. They begin confident, then trail off. They assert, then explain. That tonal drop weakens authority. Leaders maintain consistency from start to finish. The sentence lands as one piece. Clean, final. Now let's talk about emotional containment. Leaders feel emotion, but they don't leak it into language. Anger stays internal. Frustration stays controlled. Excitement stays measured. This doesn't make them cold. It makes them predictable. And predictability creates trust. Now pause. Think about how your tone changes when you're challenged, you're excited, you're unsure. Those shifts are information. And once you become aware of them, you can correct them. Not by forcing calm, but by slowing the moment down. Leadership tone is not performed. It is allowed when urgency is removed. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into something critical. Why leaders speak last. Why timing beats content. Why the final word shapes perception. And why restraint at the end of conversations often determines who holds authority. Once you understand this, you'll stop racing to be heard and start choosing when it matters. Chapter 6. Leaders speak last. There is a reason the most powerful person in the room is often the last one to speak. Not because they were uncertain, not because they had nothing to say, but because they were watching. Leaders don't rush into conversations. They enter them already grounded, and grounding creates patience. Most people speak early because they fear being irrelevant. They want to mark their presence. They want to show engagement. They want to prove value. Leaders don't need to prove presence. Their presence is felt the moment they arrive. So they wait. And waiting gives them an advantage few people understand. When you speak last, you speak with context. You've heard what matters to others, where emotions are sitting, which ideas are weak, which tensions are unresolved. You're no longer guessing. You're responding from clarity. That's why a leader's words often feel like a conclusion, not a contribution. They don't add noise, they resolve it. Now let's talk about what happens psychologically when you speak last. The room has already spent its energy. Opinions are out. Arguments are exposed. Egos have spoken. When you finally speak, your words land into quiet, and quiet amplifies authority. People listen differently when they've already spoken. They're less defensive, more receptive, more aware. This is why leaders don't fight for airtime. They wait for gravity. Now here's something important. Speaking last does not mean speaking late. It means speaking after understanding. Leaders don't delay unnecessarily. They delay until clarity arrives. That distinction matters. Now let's talk about interruption. Leaders rarely interrupt, not because they're passive, but because interruption signals impatience, not power. When you interrupt, you reveal that you're reacting emotionally. Leaders let people finish, not as courtesy, but as strategy. When someone finishes speaking, they've revealed their position fully. There's no mystery left. Now you can respond cleanly. Now let's talk about meetings. In meetings, leaders often let discussion expand. They allow debate. They let chaos show its shape. Then, when the time comes, they speak once, and their words end the conversation. Not through force, through clarity. Clarity ends debate. Now let's talk about everyday leadership. You don't need a title to practice this. In conversations with friends, with colleagues, with family, let others speak first. Listen fully, then respond briefly. Notice how the dynamic changes. People stop talking over you. They stop rushing you. They wait. Because you've taught them that when you speak, it matters. Now here's the deeper lesson. Leaders don't fear being misunderstood in the moment. They trust consistency over time. They know that authority is not built in one sentence. It's built in patterns. Patterns of calm. Patterns of restraint. Patterns of decisiveness. Speaking last reinforces those patterns. Now pause. Think about how often you rush to speak, just to be included. That urgency is understandable, but it's not leadership. Leadership is the confidence to wait. In the next chapter, we'll explore another shift. Why leaders use fewer words, why brevity signals intelligence, why concise speech commands respect, and how reducing your word count increases your authority instantly. Once you understand this, you'll stop trying to sound smart and start sounding decisive. Chapter 7. Fewer words, more command. Leaders do not impress with vocabulary. They command with clarity. The biggest misunderstanding about leadership speech is the belief that intelligence sounds complex. It doesn't. Intelligence sounds clean. It sounds like someone who knows exactly what matters and what doesn't. Most people use too many words because they are still thinking while speaking. Leaders finish thinking before they speak. That's the difference. And that difference is audible. When someone speaks in long, winding sentences, the room works harder to follow. When someone speaks concisely, the room relaxes. Relaxation signals trust. Now listen carefully. Brevity is not about being quiet. It's about being precise. Leaders don't remove words randomly. They remove everything that doesn't move direction. They don't speak to explore ideas. They speak to land decisions. Now let's talk about why fewer words equal higher status. The human brain associates efficiency with mastery. If someone can express a complex idea in one sentence, the brain assumes depth. If someone needs 5 minutes to say the same thing, the brain assumes confusion. This happens subconsciously. No one decides it, they feel it. Leaders leverage this instinct naturally. They compress, they distill, they speak in conclusions, not process. Now let's talk about filler, because filler destroys authority. Words like basically, kind of, I think, maybe, sort of. These are verbal cushions. They soften impact. They signal hesitation. Leaders don't cushion statements unless diplomacy requires it. They don't hedge by default. They commit. Now consider this difference. I think this might be the best option going forward, versus this is the best option. Same idea, different leader. The first sounds tentative. The second sounds decisive. Decisiveness attracts followership. Now let's talk about sentence endings. Leaders end sentences downward, not upward. An upward inflection sounds like a question. A downward inflection sounds like a conclusion. Even when leaders ask questions, they sound grounded. They don't seek permission through tone. They seek information. Now let's talk about practice. Before you speak, ask yourself one question. What is the shortest, truthful version of this? Say that, then stop. Not because you have nothing else to add, but because you've already added what matters. Now here's the deeper shift. When you reduce your word count, people stop interrupting you. They stop predicting where you're going. They wait, because they know you'll land somewhere. Brevity creates anticipation. Anticipation creates authority. Now pause. Think about how often you keep talking past the point. How often you dilute your own message. That habit ends here. In the next chapter, we'll explore something even deeper. Why leaders don't seek approval in speech. Why talking to be liked weakens authority. Why respect outlasts popularity. And how letting go of approval instantly upgrades your voice. Once you understand this, you'll stop adjusting your words for comfort and start speaking from position. Chapter 8. Speak without seeking approval. The moment you start speaking to be liked, you stop speaking like a leader. Approval is subtle. It hides inside tone, inside wording, inside hesitation. It sounds like soft endings, extra explanations, unnecessary smiles in your voice. Leaders don't speak to collect agreement. They speak to set direction. Now listen carefully. When you need approval, your voice asks permission before it makes a statement. And permission-seeking language dissolves authority. People sense it instantly. They don't consciously think, this person wants approval. They feel something weaker, something uncertain, something adjustable. Leaders are not adjustable. They are clear. Now let's be precise. This is not about being aggressive. It's about being unattached. Leaders are unattached to how their words land emotionally. They care about accuracy, not applause. That detachment creates gravity. Now here's the paradox. When you stop trying to be liked, people respect you more. Because respect comes from self-trust. And self-trust is audible. Now think about how often people soften truth to avoid discomfort. They over-explain. They justify. They cushion. Leaders don't rush to comfort. They let clarity do its work. Discomfort passes. Confusion lingers. Leaders choose clarity. Now let's talk about disagreement. Leaders don't fear it. They don't rush to resolve tension. They allow it to exist. Because tension reveals priorities. And leaders want priorities visible. When someone disagrees, a leader doesn't defend immediately. They pause, they listen. Then they respond. Calmly, directly, without emotional charge. That response signals confidence. Not dominance, confidence. Now here's something important. Leaders don't argue to win. They state to anchor. They don't chase consensus. They create alignment. Alignment happens when direction is clear. Now ask yourself this. How many times have you changed your wording mid-sentence because you felt resistance? That's approval seeking. Leadership speech holds its form under pressure. It doesn't collapse. Now here's the deeper truth. Approval seeking comes from fear of rejection. Leadership comes from acceptance of it. Leaders accept that not everyone will agree. They accept that not everyone will like them. And because they accept it, they are free. Freedom is audible. Now pause. Imagine speaking without scanning the room for reaction, without adjusting mid-sentence, without explaining yourself twice. That is what leadership speech feels like. Clean, grounded, complete. In the next chapter, we'll talk about something that changes everything. How leaders use silence as a tool. Not awkward silence, intentional silence. The kind that creates tension, authority, and attention. Without a single word. Once you understand this, you'll realize silence is not the absence of power. It is one of its strongest forms. Chapter 9. Silence is a leadership tool. Silence is not what weak people fall into. Silence is what strong people choose. Most people think leadership is expressed through speech. Leaders know leadership is often expressed through restraint. The ability to remain silent without discomfort is one of the clearest signals of internal authority. Because silence says, I'm not rushed. I'm not threatened. I'm not dependent on reaction. Now listen carefully. Silence is not absence. It is containment. When a leader stays silent, the room doesn't empty. It focuses. People lean forward. They become aware. They start revealing more than they intended. Because silence creates pressure, and pressure exposes truth. Now let's talk about why silence unsettles people. Most people are uncomfortable without direction. Silence removes guidance. It forces others to confront their own thoughts. And when a leader is comfortable in that space, it sends a powerful message. This doesn't destabilize me. That calm stability becomes a reference point. Now let's talk about silence after a statement. This is where most people fail. They say something important, then immediately undo it. They add another sentence. They explain. They soften. Leaders don't do that. They let silence seal the statement. That silence tells the room, this stands. Now let's talk about silence during conflict. When emotions rise, most people escalate. They talk more, they defend, they argue. Leaders slow down. They speak less. They listen more. And then, when everyone else has exhausted themselves, they speak once. That one sentence carries disproportionate weight because it arrives after chaos. Clarity always sounds louder after noise. Now let's talk about silence as confidence. When you're confident, you don't need to fill space, you don't need to justify, you don't need to reassure. Silence becomes natural, not forced, not awkward, natural. Now here's the key. Silence only works when it's supported by presence. If your silence is anxious, people feel it. If your silence is grounded, people respect it. So silence is not a trick. It's an extension of inner control. Now pause. Think about how often silence feels uncomfortable to you. That discomfort is not weakness. It's unfamiliarity. And familiarity changes with practice. In the next chapter, we'll integrate everything. We'll talk about how leaders sound consistent across situations, under pressure, in calm moments, in conflict, in decision-making. Because leadership is not situational, it's coherent, and coherence is audible. Chapter 10. Coherence under pressure. Anyone can sound composed when things are easy. Leadership is revealed when pressure enters the room. Deadlines, conflict, disagreement, uncertainty. This is where most voices change. They tighten, they speed up, they sharpen, they explain more than necessary. And the moment the voice changes, authority cracks. Leaders sound the same under pressure as they do in calm. That consistency is not accidental. It is trained. Now listen carefully. Pressure does not create weakness in speech. It reveals what is already there. If urgency lives inside you, pressure amplifies it. If calm lives inside you, pressure strengthens it. Leaders don't wait for pressure to practice control. They live in control. So pressure has nothing to distort. Now let's talk about decision moments. When stakes are high, most people overcommunicate. They narrate their thinking. They justify choices. They try to manage everyone's emotions. Leaders do the opposite. They reduce language. They become simpler, clearer, shorter, because pressure demands direction, not dialogue. Now consider this. In moments of uncertainty, people don't want more information. They want stability. They want to feel that someone sees the whole picture. That feeling does not come from long explanations. It comes from measured speech. A leader says, "This is what we're doing," and stops. That sentence calms systems. Now let's talk about emotional containment. Pressure invites emotion, fear, anger, anxiety. Leaders feel these emotions, but they don't export them through language. They don't bleed into tone. They don't leak into pacing. They don't spill into wording. They contain first. Then they speak. That containment is leadership. Now let's talk about disagreement under pressure. When challenged publicly, most people defend instinctively. They explain faster, they sharpen tone, they escalate. Leaders slow down, they lower their voice, they shorten sentences. That contrast immediately shifts power, because calm is dominant over emotion, always. Now let's talk about responsibility. Leaders don't use speech to protect themselves. They use speech to protect direction. They don't say things to look good. They say things to move forward. That orientation is audible. Now pause. Think about how your voice changes when stakes rise. Do you speed up? Do you explain more? Do you feel urgency? That awareness is the doorway, because once you notice it, you can correct it. Not by forcing calm, but by removing unnecessary language. Leadership under pressure is subtraction. Now here's the integration. Everything you've learned, pace, pauses, brevity, tone, silence, converges here. Pressure is the test, and when you pass it, people stop questioning your authority. They feel it. In the final chapter, we close this audiobook properly, with identity, not technique, because once leadership speech becomes who you are, you never have to sound like a leader again. You simply are one. Chapter 11. Speak like a leader, become one. This is where everything settles, not into rules, but into presence. Leadership speech is not something you turn on. It's something you align with. Once aligned, it doesn't require effort. It becomes natural, effortless, clean. Now listen carefully. You don't become a leader by sounding confident. You sound confident when you are internally positioned. That positioning comes from restraint, from patience, from trust in your own presence. Leaders don't rush words because they don't rush identity. They know who they are in the room, and that knowing removes urgency. Now think about how far you've come through this audiobook. From urgency to intention, from explanation to clarity, from reaction to control, from noise to precision. That transformation is not cosmetic. It's structural, and structure lasts. Now here's the truth that stays with you. People don't follow volume, they follow stability. They don't respond to clever phrasing, they respond to calm direction. They don't trust voices that fluctuate, they trust voices that hold steady. Your voice is not just sound, it is a signal. It tells people whether to relax or brace, whether to listen or compete, whether to follow or question. Now you know how to shape that signal, not by forcing dominance, but by removing weakness, by speaking with intention, not urgency, by allowing silence to work, by trusting brevity, by letting your words end cleanly. This is leadership speech, and once it becomes yours, you don't need to announce it. Others will feel it. If this audiobook resonated with you, anchor it, like this, not for the algorithm, but as a personal commitment to never leak authority through rushed words again. Leave a comment with the line that changed how you'll speak under pressure. Subscribe, not for content, but for consistency. And share this with someone who has the mind of a leader, but hasn't learned to let their voice match it yet. I'll leave you with one final line. Let it guide you every time you open your mouth. Leaders don't speak to be heard. They speak because it's time. Tell me what audiobook you want next. Next. Chapter. When you walk into the room, there will be a moment you won't announce. A room you enter quietly. A conversation already in motion, voices overlapping, energy scattered. And you won't rush to claim space. You'll stand there, grounded, present, unhurried, and something subtle will happen. The room will feel you before it hears you. That's leadership. Not spoken, felt. Most people think leadership begins when you speak. It doesn't. It begins when you arrive composed, when your body is calm, when your breathing is slow, when your attention is wide, because before your words land, your presence sets the tone. Now listen carefully. People subconsciously scan for stability. They look for someone who is not pulled by the room, someone who doesn't rush to adjust, someone who doesn't mirror chaos, someone who doesn't need to be seen immediately. That person becomes the anchor, and anchors don't move. Others move around them. Now imagine this. You're asked a question. The old version of you would have answered immediately. The leader version pauses. Just a second. Not to think harder, but to choose the moment. That pause alone changes how the answer is received, because the pause says, "This matters. I'm not improvising. I'm not reacting." Then you speak. Not long, not loud, clean. And you stop. No follow-up, no justification, no emotional residue. That's the moment people remember. Not the words, the way they landed. Now here's the final internal shift. You stop measuring your speech by reaction. You stop scanning faces. You stop chasing nods. You stop adjusting mid-sentence. You speak and let the room deal with it. Because leadership speech is not about control. It's about containment. You contain yourself. The room follows. Now let me leave you with the quietest truth of all. When you truly speak like a leader, you don't feel powerful. You feel still, and that stillness is unmistakable. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't compete. It simply stands, and everything else aligns around it. Stay there, and let your words arrive only when they're needed.